Shinji and Warhammer40k, Chapter 2, and Become Legend, Part 2. Alerts rang all over Nerve. Around Evangelion Unit 1, refrigerating liquid began to drain, and heavy security bolts began to disengage from the pylons on its shoulders and around its ankles. There were plenty of military storage areas called cages, but here it was a literal application of the term. Up on a control centre, Misato Katsuragi stood at her station with a backpack by her feet. Shinji had been very adamant that no harm should come to his things and begged for her to make sure of it. It seemed a reasonable request in light of sending him out to save the world. Stuck hearing the echoes of shouted reports from the entry plug, Shinji could only wonder as to why it was all necessary. What was wrong with a weapon system that you could activate with the turn of a key? If he was the only one who could pilot it, then shouldn't they have had the precaution to keep it already warmed so he, or anyone else so authorised, could just jump in and ride out? The city was already under attack after all. He knew now that Gendo Ikari really did have the absolute authority over this place. Everything around him simply added to the mystery. If, he supposed, he was in his father's shoes and mankind really was under threat, and the only thing that could save them was a giant robot that only a moody teenager could pilot, even if the whole world obeyed the rules of a comic book, he would have tried to make it easier to respond. He breathed deep, because he felt the words were right. It was more than a machine, an artificial human. Everyone seemed to fear it just as much as they did the enemy outside. Machine spirit, what have they done? He closed his eyes and gripped the arm controls. They were afraid of the thing they created. He was afraid too, he realised. Of course, he admitted it to himself. It was all so new, unplanned, and he might die. At the very same time, the street adrenaline was starting to flow. He closed his eyes. He was blind. The future was waiting for him. He felt impatient. He felt himself moving. "Inserting the entry plug," he heard. The white cylinder containing him slid into the gap in the back of Unit 01's neck, between its vertebrae. Shinji felt something in his head buzz with eagerness. "Commencing injection of LCL into the entry plug." Next. Shinji abruptly shot up, awake. Thick orange goo was flooding the cockpit at a rapid rate. What in the warp? Right, drowning the pilot would be rather counterproductive, wouldn't it? He was slightly annoyed, thinking they should have warned him something like this might happen, if at least for the sake of not messing up his clothes. He held his breath as the liquid flowed over his head. For humanity's sake, now that he had agreed, he'd have gone into the entry plug naked if they had asked. Wait, it was probably for the better if nobody knew just how far he'd go to keep his world. "Don't worry about it. Just breathe normally," came Ritsuko's voice over the comms. "After your lungs fill with LCL, it'll directly supply you with oxygen. You'll get used to it soon." Trusting her, he exhaled and took a deep liquid-infused breath. It slid down his throat as a reverse sneeze. Nasty. He gagged, but remembered just in time that vomiting into this stuff would be a tremendously bad idea. "I feel sick," he said weakly. "Enjoy it," said Misato. "You're a boy, aren't you?" "Tastes like blood," he replied dizzily. Oh, perhaps it was too oxygenated as well. He blinked, and just like trying to see underwater, it was weird to feel something through your eyeballs. He licked his lips. "No, not like blood," he said, after a few more swallows. "I know what blood tastes like. It's like it, but something lacking. It doesn't convey that essential vitality, that flavour of life." "Shinji, I don't need to hear this," Misato ground out. "LCL is a super nutritious soup. For lack of better term, that's likely the perfect condition that brought out life in the first place," Ritsuko couldn't help but to put in. "It will insulate you, absorb shock, and is essential to the operation of the Evangelion." The scientist stopped trying to report things for the boy's benefit. "Nihongo has been fixed to the system as the fundamental interface for the operation of Eva. All initial contacts are all right." She bit her lip. She was actually hoping it wouldn't be this easy. Gendo's scenario be damned. She gave Misato a brief nod and said, "Sequence ready." "Beginning connections," said a young male voice from the bridge. Shinji felt his head turn inside out. The inside of the entry plug began to flare into a pulsating series of colours, a tangle of stark lines that looked like nerves somehow, and finally resolving into a view of the outside. It was the world as the Evangelion could see it. Shinji gasped with vertigo, and a luxurious feeling of power. Smaller windows showed the people in the command centre. The connection of the A10 nerve is operational. Shinji heaved forwards, only barely managing to hold back his stomach. Vomiting inside the entry plug would be really disgusting, he tried to convince himself. Worse than pissing in your own pool. Or somebody else's pool. And now he had to grit his teeth to keep from laughing and then puking anyway. The boys were such disgustingly shameless little children. The pressure in his mind intensified, as if the memory of happiness was like a little fire in the middle of dry forest. "Shinji, are you okay?" Misato asked, as she saw him put his hands to his head, sway from side to side. They were so tiny. Like ants. The human was an insignificant speck in the cosmos. Why would anyone care what the little bugs should think? "My mind bears a great pain," he hissed. "Ritsuko-san, I take back my words. My lungs are filled with liquid. How is it you can understand what I speak? Sub-vocalization? There's no air to move my vocal cords. My thoughts go directly to a vox. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. Machine telepathy already? My mind to your mind. My eyes are yours. Give yourself to me, machine spirit." "That's surprisingly perceptive of you, Shinji," she added. "Maybe too perceptive, because like I said, my mind bears a great pain." It was a storm raging within the confines of his consciousness. Winds, or as far as he could equate them with, were carving away at the inside of his skull. At the centre of it, his brain felt like a burning mass of tissue being warped by the changing pressure. "No, you can't eat me. No! Ritsuko!" "It's incredible," was the only thing the scientist could say. "The mutual lines are connected," Maya breathed out. "The connection's at 40%. There, it's spiked again. 60, 70. It's rising." She put her face closer to the screen. "It's falling again." Shinji screamed. He felt his flesh being flayed from his bones. He felt his will being drained away from his soul. He felt naked and lost in the middle of that maelstrom. "Feed," it said. "Hunger, pain, hurt, hurt, hurt. Move? No! Move! Hurt, pain, kill!" "Everything sealed is still at primary secret, Senpai. The Evangelion's still deactivated. I don't get why he's getting this. Usually the feedback only goes the other way." "Ritsuko." Misato's feet touched the bag at her feet. "Maybe we need to stop this. He's hurt even before he's faced the angel." "No." Two voices said that. Ritsuko looked up in surprise at the main screen. There, Shinji, his face grimacing, tears mixing with the LCL, stared back at her. His pupils were dilated. "I will..." His eyes rolled up in his head and he fell back on his cockpit. Howl. A boom. "The Emperor protects!" The storm abruptly broke apart. A lash of wind blew outwards from the centre. The mind was bright and empty, and there in the middle lay slumped over a young boy, still 10, still in his white shirt and black shorts. Something dropped from the heavens. It smashed upon the ground of the mindscape, splintering it, sending cracks out to and far past behind the boy. Under the smoke was great shape, rising to its feet. Out of the fog of his uncertainty strolled in all his might, in all his surety, in all his vast will. The Space Marine. A figure tall, bulky and red, the eagle gilded on his chest armour gleaming under an unseen sun. His left hand carried a chain sword, already longer than the boy was large. The right had a bolter. His mere fist was larger than the boy's entire torso. He stepped forwards, a giant of righteous vengeance. His face was set in grim and deadly purpose. The boy looked up, tears in his eyes, and sniffled. "You came. You followed me." "Always, Commander. Always. The Emperor protects. His legions shall send his glory to those who are worthy." The Space Marine hefted his sword up, as if to cleave the boy in two, then stabbed it into the ground in front of him. The Space Marine set his hands on the hilt and knelt. "I am forever at your command." He bowed his head. "I shall stand against the darkness. Let your enemies be mine." And when he raised his head again, Shinji stood there, in his current age. His eyes were dry. His hair moved slightly to a suitably dramatic breeze. He was still so small and insignificant as standing, compared to a kneeling Adeptus Astartes. "How are you here?" he asked. "Didn't I leave you with Misato-san?" The Space Marine idly tapped his fingers on the hilt. "Oh, yeah, right, not made of plastic. But I've never been able to think of any of you this distinctly without seeing something to focus on." Strangely, too, Shinji didn't think much of his own imagination. Antics and conversations were just natural. To visualize them in his mind, he felt that perhaps making them move would leave them as puppets. He didn't want that. He let them be as he wished to be, or as far as that was possible. "When you had her blood to your lips, and let its red cover your eyes, you swore an oath, a blood angel oath, to protect her forevermore. I am here, and let me protect you as I have sworn. Let the Emperor's will protect us all." The Space Marine stood up again, pulling his chainsword out of the ground with very little effort. He brought it up and pointed it at the distance. "And together we shall smite the enemies of humanity!" Whoosh! Humanitas. This is the world that should... Shinji opened his eyes wide, and it was all as one. He was awake and in control. "The rate of synchronization has dropped, and holding at 66%. All harmonic values are normal, Senpai," said Maya. "It's all under control." "It will function," the blonde-haired scientist stated most emphatically, and tinged with a little regret, glancing at Misato. "Shinji, can you hear me?" I'm fine, Misato-san. Must have been travel lag." "Are you sure?" Like hell it was, Ritsuko thought of the exchange. Her Evangelions had never exhibited that behaviour before. It seemed like the natural fact of existence that the Evangelions were built to go wild. "I can do this. Please." His cheek twitched. "We have no more time to waste. Please, trust me." The one in charge of operations gave her own approval. "Prepare for launching." "Shinji, I don't care about being brave. Please, live." The Evangelion shot up the delivery system and emerged right behind the angel. It turned and looked, more curious than anything, at this strange parody of a being that stood unmoving before it. Shinji shut his eyes, letting the feelings wash over him. "Is this what it's like?" he asked softly. "It's sight to your sight. It's might to your might. Yes, this is very much like how a black carapace should feel." The whisper was faint, like from a distance. "To feel like a space marine," he answered back inside. "Shinji, what are you doing? Move!" Misato yelled. "It's on you!" Shinji blinked his open eye to see the angel drive a fist right at his face. For some reason, the angel switched from inspection directly to intent aggression. The young teen felt his teeth dig inwards. Ugh! The Evangelion spun back, receiving the full force of the haymaker. It staggered and clutched its face. There was a flash, and abruptly it was flying. Hot, dense energy pressed upon its armour, and sent it hurtling through the streets until it smashed to a halt upon a building. The Ava let out an irritated... Shinji, can you hear me?" "I can hear you, Misato-san." "Don't think about fighting for now. Just walk. Think of walking." "Think of walking," Shinji replied robotically. The Evangelion reached up and dug its fingers into the building it had sunk into. Slowly it pushed itself out of its odd nest and fell to a crouch. It shook as it attempted to lift one leg, then both knee joints. The Ava slowly stood up on its own feet. It slid one foot forward, then the other. "It's walking!" rejoiced those at the command centre. The Ava pitched forwards and fell on its face. "Ow!" "Shinji, I'm trying, it's not obeying!" "Why? Why must you fight me, machine spirit? Don't you want to destroy this enemy before you? I can taste your hatred of it." Unit 1 could only just return to a kneeling position when the Angel, having leapt impossibly high into the night sky, landed on its back, slamming it deep into the concrete. Yeah! Shinji bounced out of his seat and off the entry plug walls. Seatbelts? Why are there no seatbelts? It grabbed at his wrists and began to pull at the Evangelion's arms. Inside, Shinji stretched his own arms out and bent forward at the waist. Ah! He screamed hoarsely as the Angel began to drag the arms past the limits of their joints' rotation.
Weak, unworthy, perish.
It's not your arm, Shinji. Keep your concentration. It's not your arm. There was a snap. The Evangelion's arms dropped uselessly back with a thud. Inside, the pilot slumped at his cockpit, his eyes and expression dull. How is the Ava's protection system? He heard through the vox. It hasn't activated. The symbols aren't responding, said a young female voice. He had a feeling she would be important to him later somehow. AT field hasn't developed. Shinji felt this strange pressure, an innate wrongness in the taste of LCL. Even without seeing, he rolled, just as the Angel drove a spike of its energy attack into where his head should have been. That feeling bathed him again, and the Ava moved its body, worm-like and undignified, out of the way of another stab. That's it, Shinji-kun! Misato cheered. Dodge it, Shinji-kun! What should I do? What should I do? Retreat, Shinji! We can... The Ava flopped over on its back and began to kick out at the Angel as it approached. It then slid back on the concrete, pushing on using its feet like oars. Charge the enemy? What? I didn't say that. How do I do that without arms? What? Fine! The Evangelion barely got out of the way of another energy blast. Is there a knife? I can hold it in my teeth? The pilot has gone hysterical, noted Fuyutsuki. He only hears what he expects us to be demanding from him. My God, Misato breathed out. On the screen, the Unit 1 in all its purple insanity ran up to and head-butted the Angel, its horn actually snapping off from the impact. The broken edge left a gash on its strange right mask. What have we done? What am I doing? What in the chaotic hells am I doing? Cut the feed, said Gendo. Sir? We have no need to hear lunatic ravings. Those at the bridge looked up at him, amazed at his apparent disrespect, but all it took was a bland stare back to send them chastised properly back to their duties. Makoto dutifully did what the commander dictated. The Evangelion managed to headbutt the Angel once more. As it recovered from its surprise at the sheer unexpected nature of the attack, it caught Unit 1's head in its palm at the third try. Flash! A growing spur of bone jutted out from the back of Sachiel's elbow and then struck like a jackhammer directly into the Ava's eye. And again! The front area of the head is cracked, explained Maya. Ritsuko pressed her palms on the metal of her console. It was simultaneously better and far worse than what they had all been expecting. The armouring won't stand anymore.
Sachiel.
Shinji heard it in his mind. Her name? No, her purpose.
Itako. Only the strongest are meant to survive.
The attack went into the Evangelion's eye and out the other side. What looked very much like blood spurted forcefully out the back of its head. Red emergency hexagons sprang into many displays. As Shinji Ikari felt his mind blow out the back of its head, for a moment he saw a face, a smiling face with wispy white hair. Sachiel had tested its brother, and now is being tested in turn. Head damaged. Status unknown. The control lines are dropping one after another. The pilot. No response. Darkness. The commander's room, Nerve, was a large space occupied only by a single desk. Up at the ceiling was a glowing etch of the cannibalistic tree of life. The floor was polished to reflect it. Gendo was already there, in his usual pose, staring straight ahead. Kozo Fuyutsuki had known Gendo long enough not to be intimidated with that sullen silence, or near anything about the man. The pilot is still unconscious, Gendo, he said. Of course the father wouldn't react. I have the contents of what he bought from his home. That brought some attention. The sub-commander walked up to the desk and reached into the folder he brought. It was all unimportant articles, clothing, money, 2 notebooks that seemed to serve as recipe books, other things. Then this. He laid on the table 4 large glossy photographs. They showed disproportioned figure. One was a grim-looking man in dark red armour with enlarged gilded pauldrons. Another was a female figure in smoky black and white armour with a disapproving pointed mask. Another still looked similar to the first, but with armour in black, adorned with spikes, its face scarred and clearly evil in some manner. The last was a green monster, half man-beast and haphazard machine parts, its teeth comically oversized. We scanned them thoroughly, Gendo. There's nothing more than plastic and paint. Toys. Your son plays with toys, Gendo. The bastard scoffed a bit. At his age. Why not? He's barely into his teens. The older man's voice was suddenly all too weary. He's still a child. Isn't that what we call him? The third child? Gendo Akari stared down at the figures, past his steepled hands. These were not part of my scenario, he had to admit, but an insignificant one. They only show his continued immaturity. This reminded me again too keenly that we are placing the burden of the world upon children's shoulders. It was bad enough with Rei, but you would not want you to do this, Gendo. It is far too late for that, Sensei. You know as well as I do that if we do not defeat the angels, humanity has no hope. Shinji-kun has regained consciousness, Ritsuko said to Misato as they boarded the truck back to Nerve from their inspection of the battlefield. How is he? No external wounds. He's somewhat confused in his memory. At the captain's look, she added, They said there is no worry about mental contamination. Misato looked out at the spread of devastation in their path. To have this happen so suddenly to him, that he could actually recover this fast is a wonder. Quite so. A severe burden was imposed on his cranial nerves. His mind, Ritz-chan. His mind. We did this to him. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Shinji stared up at an unfamiliar ceiling. In the past few days, it was all that he had to distract himself with. His head felt hollow, like something was missing, and he couldn't remember just what it was that he was supposed to regret. There was knocking at his door. He turned and said, Come in. Do people actually need to knock at hospitals? In his hospital gown, he felt no privacy whatsoever. The room was merely an illusion of it. A face framed by combed brown hair poked into the doorway. She was older than Shinji, but not by so many years. As his flat stare met hers, Maya Ibuki shivered with guilt. She entered the room reluctantly. Hello, Shinji Kari-kun. My name's Maya Ibuki. I work for Nerve. He smiled slightly. I remember you. I don't think we've actually met before. Shinji closed his eyes and inched back on his bed to a more comfortable sitting position. I remember your voice. You were there. It was battle and chaos, and you were there. He opened his eyes, a gentle amusement was in them. I don't think I can forget your damedesu, Ibuki-san. She looked away, embarrassed. So, how are you feeling, Ikari-kun? Shinji brought his arms up. He distinctly remembered them breaking. The nerve doctors told him it was the Ava's own arms that broke and sent pain signals to his brain, but he dimly knew he dislocated his own arms himself. I feel as fine as I think I could be, Ibuki-san. That's good. Senpai, that is, Akagi-san, sent me here to tell you you've been released from the hospital. I'll give the reports from here to her later. She looked again at that young face, barely more than a boy, unnaturally calm. In her mind, he was still screaming. If there's anything more you need, please just ask. Shinji tilted his head to the side. Actually, if I could bother you for a favour? Yes, what is it? 2 favours, actually. The first, please call me Shinji. Ikari-san feels like my father somehow. He turned his gaze to the window. The sound of crickets chirped passed between them. Second, who was that other pilot? Huh? Maya bit her lip. Ayanami Rei. I don't really know much about her. She was injured. Is she here? I don't know. I guess I could ask. If she is, I'd be really grateful if you could take me to see her. She was there. Shinji dressed in his old familiar clothes and slowly followed Maya out. She kindly kept her steps close to match his. So many in this hospital, he said after a while. There were many injuries in the angel attack. We had to move some people as one of the other hospitals was wrecked. She turned to look at him and said in a tone only he could hear, If it wasn't for you, there would be more. Please don't worry about it. You're a hero, Shinji-kun. He nodded. So the ordinary people weren't to know about the Evangelions or its pilot. They could better live their lives in ignorance. Still, so many. He clenched his fists. He saw people on wheelchairs, people who had lost their legs, people who had their heads bandaged, people with both limbs in casts. He should look like them. It seemed unfair. He wasn't fast enough, strong enough, and others would suffer in his stead. They reached a room much like any other in that hospital. Maya's nerve card let them past doors and doctors. Inside there, Ray lay, clad now in hospital green. Sunset was there, and under it she looked still even more helpless. Shinji grit his teeth. Ibuki-san, could you wait outside, please? She hesitated at the expression on his face, but nodded and left. Shinji walked into the room. At first he thought she was asleep, then saw she was merely staring outside. He went to stand beside her bed and waited. Minutes later, slowly, she turned to face him. He was struck again by how familiar she looked. The protective feeling welled up again. Her paleness, blue hair and red eyes. Otherworldly. She stands always in moonlight, he thought. Ayanami-san. She made no reply. Do you know me? You are the pilot of Evangelion Unit 1. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. I'm Shinji Akari. You are? I am Ayanami Ray, pilot of Evangelion Unit 0, she replied blandly. How long have you been a pilot, Ayanami-san? Ray tilted her head a bit as she attempted to remember. She closed her eyes and shook her head slightly. She had no way of quantifying her earlier years. She had never celebrated birthday, so she had no means of checking the passing of years. I do not know. Shinji absorbed the odd certainty in her reply. He clenched his fists again. You would have gone in my place. Knowing now just how much literal pain was involved in fighting with the Evangelion, it spoke a lot of her courage, and vastly even more of how much his father had used the situation to force him, untrained and unprepared, into an unthinking tool. He bowed. For that, I thank you. You defeated the third angel, she said. It was obvious. Otherwise they would have been talking. I would not have been able to. That's immaterial. You would have gone anyway. Thank you, Ayanami-san. She could only nod. Someone being grateful was to her not a part of her reach of experience. Instead, she observed him, Commander Akari's son. Some part of her was naturally curious. A meaningless silence extended between them. How bad are your injuries, Ayanami-san? Shinji asked. She told him. How did you get them? She told him the complete truth again, thinking that now that he was a pilot, their security clearance could allow it. Evangelions, machine spirits created by man, for war, that causes only pain. He remembered his own brief but bewildering experience. Every time she was asked to, she went in. Every time she had to wrestle with its machine spirit. This time she lost badly. Shinji abruptly unclenched his fingers. There was only one other Evangelion he knew of. Why her? Why must they send children to solve their problems? It stank to him of irresponsibility. She knew her duty. Others feared theirs. I won't have it, he said suddenly. No one should suffer as you've suffered. It is my duty. Your duty is to humanity. Humanity must prove itself worthy of your sacrifice. Listen to me. He stepped closer to her bed and loomed over her. He had worn a monster skin, but he maintained the core that gave it meaning. In what matter did she deal with it? I'm Shinji Akari. She nodded. Shinji held his thumb up to her. Bite it, Ayanami-san, he said. Wei tilted her head to the other side question. Again, Shinji offered the appendage. Seeing no other choice, she complied. With all your strength, let there be blood. She followed orders, and he winced in the sharp arrival of pain as her teeth bit down to the bone. Can you taste my blood? She nodded, her lips still around it. Ray knew the taste of blood. Somehow his was different. She let go, and red stained those lips as he took away his thumb. I have tasted your blood, he told her, letting the wound drip to the floor. Now you have tasted mine. Let me share your suffering. Let your pain be mine and my pain be a part of yours. Together, to each our burdens will lighten. The cloud covering the sun passed, and abruptly brought the room into deep golden brilliance. I am Shinji Akari, and I swear to you I will not let you suffer any more. I will fight anyone, even my father, that want to hurt you. I will give my word, Ayanami-san. You don't have to live like this. It's wrong. We shouldn't suffer like this. His was an old-fashioned worldview, and one that was stupidly chauvinistic at points. This world is not made for suffering. It is my duty. Then it will be my duty to protect you. Your duty is to pilot the Evangelion. I will pilot the Evangelion to protect you. She shook her head. The two concepts were mutually exclusive. You do not understand. As you are the son of Commander Ikari, I must protect you. But he had sworn to it. It was a paradox in a life that until then had never known doubt or uncertainty. The enemies of humanity will die. Under my hands they shall be broken. You will not need to suffer for their sake, Ayanami-san. He stood there, the golden sunlight draped over him like a cloak, and spilling over his determined face as if in halo. There was a feeling that she couldn't identify, and deep frustration. The paradox still applied, that he wanted to defeat the angels and at the same time protect her. No, it was irreconcilable, and she couldn't tell him. Her head burned. Then I must thank you, Pilot Ikari. She bowed slightly. Know that I will still do my utmost to protect you as well. He smiled at her. Be well, Ayanami-san. Be well. He bowed to her, lower. I must go now. Maya Ibuki waited there, some distance away from the door. She was trying hard not to look at him. Though some may have accused her of pining away for her senpai, which was, she admitted only to herself, quite true. At heart, Maya was a closet romantic. She felt drawn to people burning with purpose and shining in brilliance, like moth to a flame, drowning, burning, dying in their presence. Though he had asked her to leave, she just had to listen in. And there was something so deep, so romantic, so soulful in the thematic meaning of the word. She nearly squealed at seeing it. It was just too freakishly out of place in the cynical modern world that only a teenager could say it without shame. He meant it, and best of all, he had the Evangelion to do it. You're a hero, Shinji-kun, she said silently as he walked beside her. She hoped his ideals wouldn't be broken too quickly. Shinji's unease could only grow. He desperately needed the emotional security in the presence of his four figures. He was indeed happy when Misato arrived later, his backpack slung over her shoulders. He never even noticed that his wound, like in the Evangelion, had already completely healed. I'm not going to live with my father? He asked her. No, the woman replied sadly. I guess he just has too much to do still. He lives alone in a gloomy old apartment anyway, some people tell me. Just as well. I know he's important to our operations, but I might not be able to resist poisoning that callous bastard. Shinji! He smiled genuinely. Joking. The truth is I don't mind being alone. All places are the same. As long as he had his figures and imagination, all places can be painted and awesome. Where would they stick him anyway? A place presumably filled to the brim with all sorts of monitoring equipment. How could he possibly think himself alone in there? Misato frowned slightly. They were standing in front of an elevator. She backed away at seeing the commander in it. For a second, Ikari and Ikari locked eyes and wills again. Shinji backed down first, looking down at Gendo's shin. The man looked satisfied and walked on. Yes, Shinji thought. Give him what he wants. Let him become part of my scenario rather than dancing to his. Misato grimaced. I'm beginning to see what you mean, Shinji-kun. Her face lit up as she got an idea. Could you wait around here for a moment? She rushed off. Minutes later, Misato was at a telephone. What? Ritsuko said from the other side. As I said, I've decided to take charge of Shinji-kun. I've even got the full agreement from my superiors. Her eyes squinted, and she grinned, cat-like. Don't worry, Ritz-chan. I'll try not to take advantage of a minor. That goes without saying, the receiver yelled at her. To even start thinking about it. Misato! Shish! Can't take a joke. She turned to see Shinji some distance away at a vending machine. Such a pity. She thought he might actually disobey and listen in. How boring. But maybe boring is good, after what just happened. So I'm going to be living with you? He asked while in the car. That's right, she replied cheerily. I'm your direct superior in terms of nerve activities anyway, so it's more convenient this way. Shinji looked out the window. Convenient, he repeated. A nerve officer's home would be under far less scrutiny. The risk of blackmail was the reason behind all those privacy clauses. Very convenient. He nodded. It would do. They stopped at a convenience store to pick up some supplies. The young teen noticed Misato was driving out of the city. Where are we going? She giggled a bit. It's a special place. There up on the bluff in the darkly setting sun, they beheld Tokyo free. The signs of battle were clear. Streets ripped up, buildings torn down. That man-shaped depression there? Oh, he knew that too. There were very little lights. It's kind of desolate, isn't it? He muttered sadly. Shh! Watch! An alarm rang throughout the city, reaching them even at the outskirts, and then slowly, with measured elegance, homes and hopes began to rise. The buildings are growing, he had to say. This is great! This is the fortress city for interception against the angels. Tokyo free. Our home, and the home which you protected. Shinji dug around his pack and brought out the 4 Warhammer figurines, as if to let them see. He felt their rush of welcoming voices enter his mind and fill his soul. Death to the enemies of humanity, Commander. Glory to the Emperor.
That was good stompings there, eh? Glory to you, bright lord.
It is well that we are in your hands once more. Misato looked over at his supremely relieved face. Were those tears forming in his eyes? You know, when you forced your backpack on me, I thought you might be hiding some dirty secret. But, Shinji-kun, aren't you too old for toys? Men are forever boys, and we're never too old for toys, Misato-san. She chortled. I guess that's true enough. Misato said something about his things having arrived, and having moved there only the other day, herself. He thought about that. Either she lived somewhere else or was new to the city. In the former, he felt guilty as the chances were likely he'd demolished her previous apartment. In the latter, it was all so strange that it went just ahead of the first angel attack in so many years. Tadaima, he said upon crossing the doorway. I'm back. It was traditional. He knew the value of traditional. Okay, Misato replied with a smile. Welcome home, Shinji. Ah! Well, the room is somewhat untidy, she said. You know how it is. Chaos. Such chaos. Beer cans, bottles, snack food wrappers, scattered all around. He went over to place the food in the refrigerator as she'd asked. More beer. What kind of life does she lead anyway? See, whispered a buttery voice. She hurts. Deeply. An alcoholic drinks to forget. Oh, Misato-san, no one should suffer like this too. What can I do to help? Well, first things first, I don't care if she thinks it presumptuous. One must guard oneself against chaos. Demons of untidiness, fear me! I have come with the mob of justice and the sponge of truth. I shall cleanse you from this home. Let it be sanctified with the sweet scent of the Emperor's soap. Misato watched him go at it, the young teen's face delighted and occasionally cackling ominously. She prepared the food, instant meals, while he worked. Maybe rooming with this crazy kid wouldn't be so bad. It's not too bad to eat with others, is it? She asked him once more. He looked very satisfied. He nodded. Friends and family make even the meanest dish into a banquet. Oh? Could you tell me about them? How did you live without your father? It actually seems better that he left me in the first place. We were pretty normal out there. Misato smiled. I'm happy for you. They then played rock, paper, scissors for chores. Misato thought she was pretty good at it. Meanwhile, Shinji tried desperately to lose. Okay, I'll do everything except laundry. Don't be like that, Shin-chan. Really, it's okay. No, it's... Wait, you're trying to guilt me into backing out of our agreement, aren't you? Your reverse psychology won't work on me. But Misato-san... La, not hearing you. Go take a bath and wash those thoughts away. At that point, Pen came out, a tiny bath towel on his shoulders. He stared up at Shinji, who was about to enter. The two stared at each other for a while, with Misato looking on as a third party. After some more time, Shinji asked, Emperor Penguin? Hail! A hand and a flipper were raised in salute. Shinji went into the bath. Pen went into the fridge. Misato was left denying what she just saw. Shinji stared up at another unfamiliar ceiling. This too. I don't know anything about this city. What should I really be doing here? In another time he would have asked why. Here the future is still hazy, but there was one constant. The angels are enemies of humanity. They must be destroyed. The how was the only thing puzzling him. He had to destroy Gendo's foul scenario in the meantime. He closed his eyes. Wish I could actually pray to the God Emperor. I wish someone could actually hear me. But the future is not built on wishes. Psychograph has reversed! Pulses are flowing backwards! Maya shouted. Cut the circuits. Stop them. No way. The signal's being refused, she continued. She looked back to her senpai. It can't be received. Unit 01 is totally silent, added in Makoto. Damn it. So much for this last best hope. Stop the operation. Misato brought her authority in, despite the look on Ritsuko's face. Impossible, the scientist said, looking over Maya's console. They both said it. It's totally out of control. The Evangelion roared. All electronic feeds to the cockpit were still shut down. Even the recorders were jumbled. No one could hear Shinji say to himself, Let its might be my might. Let its fury be my fury. Death to the enemies of humanity! The Evangelion rose up and lunged at Sachio. It slammed against the red barrier. We have won, said Futsuki. AT field, Ritsuko breathed. As long as that's up, the Eva can't touch the angel.
Evangelion's spreading its own AT field. It's neutralizing it,
shouted Shigeru Aoba over at his console. Arms fully restored! And the Evangelion pushed, and AT field and all, the angel went tumbling back down the street. Unit 1 roared once more and crouched. It punched at the ground, and the streets cratered deeply even before its fists touched it. Inside, Shinji screamed, Pain! Hurt! Kill! Behind the red in his vision, people walked past. He thought of all those he knew, and there was Minase who had hurt, Rei who is hurt, and Misato and all the others who will hurt. That was the sacrifice of the Astartes, to become more than human and suffer for those who could not. I will never let anyone suffer again! Shinji felt a presence, approving, and the madness faded away. He felt the power of the machine spirit overflow within him. The Evangelion leapt in one bound, crossing the distance. Sachio had its AT field up, but as both AT fields met, they shattered. Unit 1 grabbed it in a flying tackle. Buildings in their way crumbled into rubble. Its eyes glowed with primal fury. As the angel stood up, the Eva got it right at what passed for its jaw. Backhand across the same place, sending the angel reeling. Hard punches right over its face. Knife-like palm thrusts to just below the ribs. More and more wild punches, finishing off with a shin-bone, groin-crushing kick extravaganza. The angel had no expression and no genitalia, but one could almost see a rip on its bone-like mask. Both Gendo and Fuyutsuki sighed fondly. You. The Eva brought a two-fist smash over the back of the angel's head, driving it to the ground. Once there, it stomped on its head, pushing it into the concrete and the metal beneath. It looked like a child pitching a fit, but each one had the city shaking. Stomp! 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 Billboards fell off their metal frames. Cars bounced up. The pavement flickered red with each stomp. Weakly, the angel lifted up its arms and caught the Ava in a double energy smash, sending it all the way across the street again. Both Ava and Angel got up to their feet and stared at each other over the distance. The power cable had snapped and only barely a minute remained, and they stood there and stared. Then, a roar. The Evangelion pitched forward in a full run. Satchel blasted away at it with another pair of energy attacks. Two spinning crosses of raw sunfire. Unit 01 merely ploughed through and swatted each aside with the back of its hands. The angel still had no expression, but even those below could see its astonishment and fear. It threw bolt after bolt, and the Eva kept on swatting them away, until with one final lunge, Unit 01 roared and headbutted it one more time. The jagged end of its broken horn drove deep into Satchel's bone-like mask, and ichor flowed out from the cracks. It slumped against the Evangelion, stunned senseless.
Brother, why'd you betray me?
Unit 1 twisted its fingers into a claw-like shape and stabbed at the angel's chest. Incredibly, it seemed to want to pull out the core. Satchel screeched at the realization. It expanded and wrapped itself around the Evangelion. Self-destruct. Chaos reigned in the command center for a few moments as the sensors tried to recalibrate. "What happened to the Eva?" Misato screamed. Then there, amidst fire and screaming darkness, walked the Evangelion Unit 1. It lifted its face to the heavens and roared. Within, Shinji breathed heavily, or at least gurgled LCL.
That's done.
That's done. He began to chuckle, then laugh. That's done! That's done! Now he gets to stop Gendo! The Ava made another roar, even louder, that sounded somewhat like It lifted on foot and drove it deep into the pavement. Then in an exaggerated walk forwards, the other, and even deeper. Once more and it slipped. It lost its balance and fell. Its unarmoured face bounced off the ground once more. It had lost power. Shinji, his sync ratio briefly passing 100, knocked himself unconscious. "The system has been recovered. The graph is in the normal position," said Maya. "Survival is confirmed," said Makoto. Misato urged them on. "Begin pilot recovery. The survival of the pilot is to be our utmost priority." "Shinji?" "Yes, Misato-san." The young teen turned to see his new guardian silhouetted against the open crack of his door. "Is there anything you want?" No, Shinji. What you did today was a praiseworthy thing," she said somberly. "You should be proud." "Thank you, Misato-san." "Thank you, Shin-chan." And then she closed the door fully. In the darkness, Shinji stared up again at the ceiling. Shadows from the street made strange dancing figures up on it. He tried to trace out images that were familiar. "We still needs to stomp Gendo," he said softly, before falling asleep.